let's talk about lightning rods. So lightning rods is a concept that I have and I've written about it on slyflourish.com, and we wrote extensively about it in the book Forge of Foes, my book of monster building and running that I wrote along with Scott Fitzgerald Gray and Teo Sabadia. And in this book, we talk about lightning rods. And the concept behind a lightning rod is putting certain monsters into a combat encounter that are specifically designed to take on and showcase powerful character abilities. So a lot of times, a less experienced GM will see players that are focused on really powerful abilities that they have, and they will build monsters that are able to get rid of or push away or resist these powerful abilities. And it creates a problem because players don't want to have monsters that get rid of their fancy abilities. Lightning Rods flips this whole idea on its head and instead says, why not put monsters in that are specifically there to take those powerful abilities? I like to call them sin eaters too. This idea of a single monster that sort of absorbs the sins of these powerful monster abilities or these powerful character abilities. Robert Table says, shoot the monks, and shoot the monks is a good philosophy on this idea. Instead of like avoiding the monk using their ability to grab an arrow and throw it back, your enemy archers should always shoot at your monks so that the monk can do the cool thing. And that's really what we're talking about, is putting in creatures that are designed to help the characters do the cool thing. So there are several purposes for lightning rods. One, they can turn adversarial GMing into a focus on the characters. You're leaning in on their powerful character abilities and being fans of those abilities rather than trying to circumvent them or avoid them. They help you avoid the vexation of having your monsters incapacitated because they were designed to do so. You put them there specifically to have this stuff happen to them. You want these monsters to be incapacitated. You're not mad they're incapacitated. You want them to be incapacitated. They also let you steer away a lot of these kind of save or suck or powerful abilities away from the powerful boss monsters that you want to challenge the characters. Right? So they give you an opportunity to showcase to your players, you're not going to be able to dominate the boss with Dominate Monster. But those big ass dumb dudes that are off to the left and right, those guys can be dominated, right? You can clarify, like those are where you can put your things. So that's the key. Some key mantras, some key philosophies to lightning rods. One, shoot your monks, right? Shoot arrows at monks so that it's really fun for the monk to be able to turn it around. Provoke opportunity attacks. Players love it when you have a monster that runs away from them and they get an opportunity attack. They love doing it. It's also a great way. If you have characters that have the spell shield, you can bait out their shield. You can stop them from casting shield by baiting out an opportunity attack. That's adversarial GMing. It's not great, but it works. Group weaker monsters into 20-foot radius circles. Right? Have your monsters group up together so that areas of attack can really hit them all. It's really fun. Charge into those spirit guardians. When the cleric has fired up spirit guardians, run into it like a lawnmower, right? That's what they're for. Of course, you don't have to do this all the time. Not every battle needs to be perfectly designed to set up the right lightning rods for the right situations. This is something that you want to keep in mind, and when you're designing big battles, give you an opportunity to put monsters in there that are specifically designed to be handled certain ways, rather than being mad when you put monsters in that you expect to be a big threat and then they turn out they're not a big threat. But this is like the dials of monster difficulty. One of the criticisms I get about the dials of monster difficulty, the idea that you can change the number of monsters, the hit points of monsters, the damage they do, and the number of attacks they have. One of the criticisms I get is, oh, you're just making things up. You're deciding exactly what's going to happen. And they're forgetting that, no, those dials are set at 0, and then you turn them when you need them. You don't just mess with them all the time. Lightning rods are the same kind of thing. You put them in there when you think they're going to help you. You don't have to constantly use them all over the place, right? It's not an always on thing. It's something that you use from time to time. Another big factor is that this really matters at 5th level and above. From 1st to 4th level, character power is already kind of bounded. They don't really have a lot of stuff that's going to be manipulated by this, so you really don't have to worry too much about using things like lightning rods or also waves of monsters and other sort of techniques that can keep the pressure on powerful characters. You don't need to have those. You don't really need to worry about those until characters get to 5th level and above. So for lightning rods, there are really 4 types of monsters that we're going to talk about with lightning rods, but then there's subsets too, depending on what sort of class features you have. And I'm giving my own names to these, so don't get too excited about the names. You can call them something else. My names are not official. I just call them this. I might change my mind. In fact, one of them, I sure wish I had a better name for it than I do. So I don't know what to call it. Minions. Minions are generally of a challenge rating of 1/5 to 1/10 of those of the character levels. They usually have roughly 20 hit points or less, and often you can drop 4 to 8 of them per character. Again, this is assuming the characters are 5th level and above, so don't presume 1st to 4th level. And the idea here is lots and lots of little dudes, right? And you want those lots and lots of little dudes to have a few things. One is, if you fireball them, they should all generally die, which is why that hit points of roughly 20th. You could even make it less, like 10 hit points. 10 to 14 hit points would mean that a good fireball would probably take them all out, even if they make their saving throws. Maybe you get some where they survive a little bit if you hit them. But generally, minions, the idea of minions is there's lots of them. They're not that dangerous independently. They love to be blasted with area of attack spells. They're designed to be, their lightning rod is areas of attack. Fireballs, cones of cold, big blasts, right? Things that destroy minions, turn undead. Great ways to get rid of minions. So big piles of small dudes is one of the types of monsters that work well for lightning rods. I'm going to call them normies, but I need a better name than normies. Normies are monsters that are roughly equivalent to a character. One monster is roughly equivalent to a character. They usually have a challenge rating of about half of the character's level. So if you have a level 8 character, a CR4 monster is roughly as a normie. They are, standard issue. The idea is there's one per character. If you have 5 characters, you have 5 normies. The normies and the characters are about the same. So, I don't know what you would call them. Peers is another one, basics, there's different names, but I'm going to call them normies. And they're one. These are really good for being controlled, right? You can charm them, you can dominate them, you probably aren't going to put them to sleep, but you might manage to get slightly more than half of them with like a hypnotic pattern. They will take areas of attack pretty well, but you're probably not going to hit a lot of them. You might hit 3 with an area of attack spell, 2 to 3, depending on what they are. They're good to be tanked, right? Like fighters and barbarians and other ones like to tank them. Your melee characters typically aren't real big fans of minions unless you have special rules that let them cleave through minions, because they're going to waste an attack on monsters that usually don't have a lot of hit points. But they like fighting normies because they can usually take a normie down. A good normie can be taken down with one full volley of attacks. Like a fighter who uses action surge might be able to take down a normie in one hit, or one round anyway. A bunch of hits, but one round. Brutes. So brutes are roughly the equivalent of the CR is roughly equivalent to the character level. So a brute, if you have level 8 characters, a CR8 would be a brute. They're roughly equivalent in challenge rating to character level, 1-to-1. They usually count for about 2 characters. So if you have 4 characters, 2 brutes is about right. Brutes are big, they hit hard, they have lots of hit points. You're not going to one-shot them. Even with all your biggest volley of attacks, you're not going to be able to one-shot them. But often they are controllable. So these guys are really great for dominate, for banish, for hypnotic pattern, right? You're not going to kill them with an area of attack. They're not going to be very effective with areas of attacks because there's not going to be that many of them. But they're really good for control. If you can pin one down, barbarians like them because barbarians can go up against them and they're going to take half the damage from all the hits that these guys are doing. So they like tanking them. But again, banish is the real key. Like banish is a spell that's very common at like level 7 and above. And these guys love to be banished, right? The brutes are great for banishing them. But any other kind of control can work well. Dominate works well on them because then they're on your side and they'll go punch their friends. So that works really well. And then you have bosses. This is the 4th monster type. Bosses are roughly of a challenge rating of about 1.5 times the level of the characters, which is about as high a challenge rating as you want to run against the characters. And often they are legendary. From 5th level and above, they are often legendary monsters, or if you have a boss, you ought to give them some legendary traits, particularly legendary resistance. You usually have 1 per group. You're not going to usually run more than 1 of these guys for any given group. And they are going to resist a lot of the save or suck spells. They usually have a lot of hit points. They have pretty high armor class. They're hitting them is not a guarantee. And they usually resist a lot of the effects. And when you're running a battle, it helps you to tell your players, hey, just to let you know, like, hey, tell them they're legendary and make it clear to the players that like they're not going to be able to get away with, just controlling a boss. And they shouldn't be, because the boss is really powerful. You shouldn't be able to cast one spell and completely get rid of a boss. You shouldn't be able to banish a boss and get rid of it with one shot. That's why legendary resistance exists. That's why we have other tools like doom points, dreadful blessings, which I've talked about, ways to protect your bosses. But one really great way to protect your bosses is arcing those Savor Suck spells to your lightning rods. You have lightning rods that are there to take those powerful spells so that they can get brought away. Right? So, I brought this up. Minions are great for crowd control, fireballs, and areas of attack. They're not particularly great for one-on-one fights because they're going to be taken down too quickly. Normies are great for crowd control and tanking. Right? Anytime you have melee attackers who like to lock down a monster, locking down a normie is great. Same thing is true for brutes. Brutes love to be crowd controlled. They're great for tanking. They're probably not going to be taken out with one round. It's probably going to take a couple of rounds to get rid of a brute. And then bosses should be hard for everyone. Bosses shouldn't have a weak spot that you could just exploit with one single spell. But let's talk about specific lightning rods per class. So we're going to go through all 12 classes, and we're going to talk about what kind of monsters those classes like. Some of the things that got my mind on this recently is the fact that we have... I started playing Solasta, the role-playing game Solasta, on my Steam Deck. Solasta is a 5e based role-playing game that is very true to 5e. And it really showed me what kind of monsters I like fighting, what kind of tactics I use with different classes, what kind of stuff do I love. I love using Spirit Guardians, and I love it when monsters are stuck against my fighter and they have a choice of either ending their turn inside Spirit Guardians or taking an opportunity attack to leave. And they take the opportunity attack, I get to hit them, they take damage, they walk away, and then I move the Spirit Guardians right back up to them next turn anyway. That's the kind of stuff where I was as a player, I saw what it's like and how it's fun to do that sort of stuff. And now I can use that on the GM side to be I bet you this is really fun for them. So we're going to go through the classes. The Barbarian. Barbarians love big brutes. They love to lock down brutes, and as long as those brutes are doing the kind of damage that the barbarian can resist, barbarians are really happy. Players of barbarians love to hear how much damage they mitigated. They love to know you would have taken 60 damage, but you only took 30 because of being a barbarian. It was really awesome. They love to face low AC, high hit point monsters that the barbarians can really hammer on, right? And can really dish out. So they love tanking big monsters. Those brutes are really good for barbarians. Don't try to cheat and give brutes the damage type that gets around the barbarians' resistances. You don't have to specifically aim for it, but you should know that lightning rods for barbarians are working when the barbarian is resisting the damage. They love that. Bards are a little tricky, and a few of these classes are a little tricky because it really depends on the build and it depends on the kind of spells they take. But we're going to try to do our best here. So often bards like to charm stuff. They like to charm, they like to do mind stuff. So anything they can do to hit monsters, either normies or brutes, that they can then lock down with charm or command or hypnotic pattern or dominates, other kind of spells that do control. Again, depending on what spells the bard has taken can also matter too. Areas of attack, sometimes bards take area of attack spells. Sometimes bards will take, again, like banish and stuff like that. Sometimes they'll take counterspell. I'll get into counterspell, but counterspell is one where if you want to make a character happy who has counterspell, have spell casting creatures that they get to counterspell, right? That can help out. Recall that when you put those monsters in there, they're going to be counterspelled. They're going to be almost completely ineffective. So keep that in mind. Clerics love to fight undead. Turn undead is their baby. So whenever you have piles of undead that they can use turn on, that's great. Especially when their turn can destroy undead. Then those monsters are taking damage on top of being turned. In many cases, they're all getting wiped out. They love doing that. Clerics love doing that. Creatures that are vulnerable to radiant damage or that lose their regeneration, like vampires. Clerics love fighting vampires. There's a reason why that's such a trope. They love outsiders they can banish and who stay permanently banished. And of course, when they have Spirit Guardians up, they love to have monsters charge into Spirit Guardians. Spirit Guardians is a really staple spell for clerics, almost as much of a staple as Fireball is for a wizard. And boy, charging into Spirit Guardians, having lots of monsters run into Spirit Guardians, having minions run into Spirit Guardians and get destroyed makes clerics very happy. Druids. Big monsters, it depends. If they're using the Circle of the Moon and so they're able to transform into big monsters, then they're a lot like a barbarian. They like to tank big stuff. They like to go up to big brutes or to normies or big brutes, pin them down, hit them with all of their attacks, and take that damage. The monsters, the creatures that druids typically shapeshift into don't usually have a lot of defense, but they can often have a lot of hit points, so you can do a fair bit of damage to them. And then, of course, monsters that are susceptible to the types of spells that druids take. Druids will often take like battlefield control spells, your spike growth spells, run into spike growth, let your monsters get grinded up in spike growth, entangle, monsters that can get controlled with entangle. They like that too. That can work. Fighters, big monsters with low armor class and high hit points, similar to a barbarian. They love to be able to pin them down. Several monsters that can be dropped in a single hit with multi-attack. So if they can do multi-attack and action surge and they can drop them, they love to take single normies out. I've done this as a fighter. I love to take out a normie with just a volley of attacks and action surging. And like this one monster that was like, it was pretty tough. And I took it down in a single turn. That's really great. Provoking. Fighters love it when monsters provoke opportunity attacks, so definitely give them that chance. And then look at their battlefield maneuvers, and if you're using weapon masteries, the weapon masteries that the player likes to use, and then build monsters that are really good for that, right? Like let them trigger a lot of those abilities that they have with their various maneuvers. Monks. Monsters with low constitution saving throws for stunning strike are really good. Monsters that are far away, but that monks can reach because of how fast they are is also really good. So if you want to have like a mage, almost like the counterspell example, mages who are high up and far away, but the monk can run up to them and get to them and then stunning strike them, they really love that. That's really fun. And then shoot your bow. Archers that shoot bows at monks are great because then they can turn around and throw them right back. So there's a couple things for monks. Paladins, monsters that are vulnerable to radiant damage. Paladins love to hit them. Undead and monsters that trigger the extra damage from a divine smite. They also love that. That extra D8 is just really fun to add on. So when you're fighting undead, and I've played paladins a lot, and boy, it's really fun when you're playing a paladin. You get to hit undead and you get that extra damage that you do from doing a smite. It makes you feel really efficient. Monsters that force characters to make saving throws and that the paladin can boost up with saves in an aura is something that paladins really like. That's a little tricky. But again, if you throw a lot of saves on them and a lot of like save or suck spells, but the paladin has their aura up and it's giving everybody these big bonuses to saves, those are really nice. Paladins like to know that they're protecting their group, so giving them the chances to do so is really nice. Rangers love to shoot things far away with their bow. They love to use Hunter's Mark. They like to shoot with a bow. They might have some battlefield control like Entangle and stuff like that. So if you have opportunities for that, again, spike growth, things like that. Monsters that run away or try to hide after being hit with Hunter's Mark, but the ranger can still track them. That's an often not very used feature of Hunter's Mark, but if you have the opportunity to use it, that's a good one. Rogues. Obviously, anything they can hit easily with sneak attack. Rogues love to sneak attack. This is one where instead of just lightning rods for monsters, it also really helps to have some terrain for the rogue. Give them things they can hide behind. Give them lots of cover so they have opportunities to do their hide, run. I did a whole thing about hiding in the last show. Hiding and running around, they like to be able to do that. A real trick, if you want to make them happy, is monsters that provoke opportunity attacks and are able to re-trigger the rogue sneak attack, make them feel really good. If they get 2 sneak attacks a turn around, they feel, they get a good benefit from that. So taking those opportunity attacks. And then there's a subtle one of like the opportunity to pick a monster's pocket in combat is really fun. Sorcerers. Lots of little monsters are good with areas of attack. And a big one is normies are good for sorcerers because they like to twin spells, and they can twin spells and get like double the efficiency out of a single target spell. So normies work really well. Brutes work really well too because there's usually a couple of them as well. If they're using counterspell, sorcerers are one of the few that can use subtle spell to cast counterspell without being countered themselves. So that's really fun for them. Warlocks, ranged monsters that are able to be blasted with Eldritch Blast, particularly ones that are susceptible to whatever improved invocations for Eldritch Blast the Warlock might have taken. So if they have the push one, putting monsters that Warlocks can blast and push is really fun. And it's one of those where like a player of a Warlock might often think that that's not a really good one because how often am I going to have that opportunity? If you tell them like, hey, you're going to get the opportunity to do that, then they'll be happier for doing that. So monsters susceptible to the kind of spells the Warlock chose. Again, you'll want to look at what the Warlock picked and then you can put your lightning rods in. That's true for all the spellcasters, really. And finally, the Wizard. The Wizard has lots of little monsters they can hit with area of attack spells, particularly evokers who can shape, love to be able to blast and hit tons of monsters. So have a big bunch of orcs running towards the characters in a 20-foot diameter or 20-foot radius circle. It makes it so much fun to blast with a fireball. Anytime they can hit 3, 4, 5 or more creatures with the fireball, the quadratic value of that fireball is something that players of Wizards really like. So give them those opportunities. Lots of monsters that can be controlled with any control spells the wizard selected. Battlefields that can be sliced up with walls of fire, force, or stone. Any ways for them to kind of fix the terrain is really fun. And enemy spellcasters that the wizard can counterspell. That really works. So those are like some features for each of the 12 classes. But the reality is for your group, you only have to worry about the classes that are in front of you. And they're going to have very particular things that they might like to do that are outside the bounds of what you have here. So even though we have the cheat sheet of essentially having like lots of minions and big dumb brutes that are very effective for different kinds of things, you can start to tailor and say like how much undead? Are there particular creature types that the characters like to fight over others? Oh, one of the characters has a dragon slaying sword. Let's make sure they have a lot of dragons in your game. What matters to your characters matters more than the generals of this entire idea. Another important feature is talk to your players. If you have the opportunity, review their characters and abilities. See what they chose. Know what magic items they have. Know what spells they've picked up. Ask them what they're excited to use. Study their behavior in the game. Watch what they enjoy. Watch what they get frustrated with. Listen to the questions that they ask about the terrain to see whether or not they're fishing for something that you can offer them. And write all of it down. Write it down in your notes. Keep an eye on like what kind of monsters you think the characters are really going to enjoy when they're facing it. So that's our deep dive into lightning rods. Lightning rods are a really effective way of being on the player's side, of making players happy, and also it becomes fun for you. You might think that, I'm just being treated as a doormat now. All my monsters are getting creamed by all this stuff. You have an infinite number of monsters. And when you're using lightning rods, you can often increase the overall challenge of the battle because some of the creatures are going to be taken out. So you can add and make it even stronger. But it's really fun to use in practice. I like using lightning rods. It makes me feel good when I see the characters doing things they really enjoy because the players have real feelings. We have real feelings. The monsters don't really care. If you like this show and you want more stuff like this, the best thing you can do is subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator for signing up, which includes a micro version of 5e that you can use at your table tonight. You also get a weekly RPG-related email with links to all of the other stuff that I do and a RPG-related email, a big article that you get every week. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of awesome stuff, the City of Arches, Key of Worlds scenarios, Readings and Reflections podcast, a dedicated Discord server, and more. And you help me directly to put on shows like this. And you can pick up any of my books, including Forge of Foes, City of Arches, Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, The Lazy DM's Companion, and more at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Links for all of that are in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a great day and get out there and play an RPG.